Hey everyone, it's Corey with Natural Born Tillers, and we're here with Season 2 of our Organic Gardening Masterclass. So we're going to be exploring sustainable food in Georgia, and today we're exploring an element of your garden that can help you grow more food, but it's not something that you eat. So today we're talking about flowers. And flowers enable you to create a biodiverse ecosystem in your garden where you're not growing something for a crop that you eat, you're growing something for aesthetic beauty, but you're also creating all sorts of niches for different animals and plants to thrive. And so while implementing a biodiverse garden plan as we do in an organic system, we want to use several different elements. And so flowers can help us fix nitrogen in the soil, they can help us attract certain beneficial insects, and they can also help us trap insects that we don't want in the garden. We're here east of Atlanta near Arabia Mountain to interview a friend of mine who's an expert in growing flowers. We figured with all the varieties and possibilities out there, we could use some help to help you grow the best flowers in your garden. All right, so we are here at Pool Sprite Farm, and this is Evan Neal. He is the head of Chattahoochee Queen Farm, and he grows beautiful flowers. Evan, how are you doing?
Good, Corey. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about your farm and what got you started and why flowers?
Well, I got started back in 2014, and flowers seemed like a good choice for me because at that time in the local farmers markets, I didn't see a lot of cut flower growers. There were a lot of up and coming and more experienced vegetable growers.
And what did you discover when you started growing flowers? Was it easy?
It wasn't easy. It was definitely a lot of trial and error, a learn as you go kind of thing. There are certainly specific requirements in our southern climate that don't match up with a lot of the literature that was available at the time. And I learned about a lot of when to plant things, the cultural requirements. It was all new. You'd read one thing and you'd have to do a completely different thing based on what our limitations are here in the southeast with the humidity and the heat and the summer. But once you learn kind of the profiles for different plants, what their needs are, I was able to dial that in over the course of a few seasons, I'd say.
If you were talking to someone, say a home gardener that's maybe dabbling in flowers, what would you tell them to start with?
Well, I think for home gardeners, I'd say there's probably two categories. There are summer annuals, things that you can plant in the spring after our frost-free date, which is typically mid-April, that are going to tolerate our hot, humid summers. So they're gonna grow and they're gonna flower. They're gonna complete their life cycle within that summer season.
Yeah. What surprised you about being a flower farmer?
I like that people assume that a flower farm or a cut flower garden is going to be like this beautiful, lush place all the time. But when you're harvesting flowers and putting them in the cooler and selling them as cut flowers at market, for example, you're cutting things before they've really had a chance to open. As they're opening, you're catching flowers on the way up as they're blooming. Because the flower is the plant attempting to complete its life cycle, flower, attract a pollinator, and go to seed. So once a flower has been pollinated, that flower phase of its life cycle is essentially ending.
It doesn't have to be beautiful anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's done that part, and now it can go to seed, and that's less glamorous. And so a lot of the times if there's too much color out in the field, it's because I haven't cut everything soon enough.
If your farm looks beautiful, you're not doing your job.
Right.
Okay.
But the home garden, for example, is a different story.
And you talked about pollinators, so we're talking about creating biodiversity in our home gardens. And so tell us a little bit about some of the pollinators that you see at your farm.
Well, just this morning we saw a hummingbird, a lot of bees, bumblebees, honeybees, a lot of wasps. I really enjoy seeing wasps and hornets out in the garden because I think they prey on a lot of smaller critters. Ladybugs, you get a lot of ladybugs eating aphids. You see a lot of birds. They're either eating insects. A lot of the times the birds aren't doing the pollinating, I don't think.
Right, but we're also, even if it's a bird that's not providing pollinator services, it's still increasing the biodiversity of your farm. So
correct.
Bringing other species in to kind of create a more integrated environment. So that's great.
Yes.
What would you say if you're starting a flower garden? What would you say are the easy wins? What are some things that you can plant and be fairly sure of success?
Well, summer is our longest season, or at least the warm, frost-free dates that we have in the southeast. So I think easy go-tos, if you've got the space, sunflowers. Those are awesome, and especially there are a lot of cut flower varieties, but then there are also a lot of seed varieties and oil varieties that would be fun to plant, and those would attract birds and pollinators. Zinnias are easy, pretty long-lived, productive garden plants for the summer in the south. The Cosmos sulphureus, the orange, the bright orange Cosmos are really nice summer color. And I personally love, they're in the amaranth family, but they're called celosias.
Okay.
And those have a tendency to come back year after year because they create so many seeds and drop them over the course of the summer. They'll be dormant over winter and then they'll come back in the same spot year after year.
You don't have to plant them again.
Right.
That's great.
Right.
What, in your opinion, goes into making a really nice bouquet?
It takes a lot of planning, making sure you have different elements ready at the same time so that you can compose an arrangement. So that means different varieties of the same species of plant, for example, like a bunch of different types of zinnias. So you have different colors, sizes, textures, and you're starting a lot in spring. So you're either starting a lot of those seeds indoors and then you're planting them out a month or two later, and then you're caring for them until they're at the flowering stage of their life cycle.
So you almost have to compose what you think would be a really nice bouquet in your head months in advance, and then that becomes reality.
Right. You're making sort of like a mood board or a color board ahead of time and then hoping it pans out.
And it usually does, right? We'll see. Do you want to go and help us make a bouquet right now?
Sure.
Awesome, let's do it.
All right. So here we are out in the field. We've got a variety of summer annuals, including sunflowers, zinnias. We've got celosia. There's some amaranth planted over that away. And I'm standing in front of, or behind some eucalyptus as well that won't really be ready until, I won't be harvesting that until the fall. So I'm gonna move through and I'm gonna harvest some flowers, show you what I'm doing, and hopefully you can take some of those tips and apply them in your own home garden. Here we are in the zinnia patch. We're gonna start harvesting, and zinnias are what I like to call a cut and come again. They're a branching plant. So every time you harvest a zinnia flower, theoretically you can encourage branching from lower on the plant, and from that branching you'll get more flowers. So you cut one flower, you get at least two more. And so I basically, when I choose a flower that's ready to harvest, this one for example, I'm not gonna harvest all the way down to the base of the plant. I'm going to see where the bottom leaves on the stem are, either these leaves here or these leaves here, and I'm gonna cut right above that. So I'm gonna cut right above those two leaves, and you'll get two branching stems coming out above them. And I then take the stem, I strip the leaves by pulling them away from the flower, and I'll trim again, and here we have a lovely harvested zinnia flower. Now we're in the sunflower patch here. I planted two varieties per bed, so a lot of these have already matured and been harvested and gone to market. If you're cutting for cut flower purposes, this is about the stage that you would like to cut sunflowers at. They're just opening. If you look at your hand and imagine your fingers are the petals you know, maybe one petal sticking out, maybe two, but you don't want to harvest when the flower is already open, because it's just not going to last as long on someone's table in their vase. So we'll go ahead and cut this particular sunflower, and I'll demonstrate my technique there. And then for our bouquet purposes, we will harvest some of these more open flowers, just so we can really see what we're getting and enjoy that. Harvesting, stripping leaves, leaving them in place to decompose. That's my preferred method. And we're gonna put that in our bunch like so. Last but not least, we're in the celosia patch. One of my favorite summer cutting flowers. It's also a great attractant for pollinators, and easy peasy to grow in the south. Not all varieties branch. This is where it gets a little tricky. You need to pay attention to what variety you're planting. Some are single stem, some are branching. So they all have a little bit of that branching in them, but from a cut flower perspective, if you're gonna pinch or harvest them, you wanna know whether or not to expect a lot more flowers coming up from side shoots, or if that's just time to mow that crop and plant something new. So this is a branching variety. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it low so it can branch out. Like so. We're gonna strip some of these lower leaves. You can cut them with your snips, which may be a little more sanitary, so you're not ripping. And I'm gonna leave some of these little side shoots on here. The theme of this composition is gonna be orange, like a solar composition here. We're working in our warm color tones. But really, when it comes to arranging or putting together a vase for the kitchen table, you have to let your own creativity be your guide, and there's no wrong way to put together some flowers. You can be bringing in elements from the entire yard. It could be a weed, but it might hold up really well in a vase, like some little peppercress, for example, growing out of a pile of rocks. Works really well and brings a nice element to a composition. This is just fine by me. So before you would put this in a vase, you would find probably your shortest stem in the entire bunch, and you would use a knife or a pair of pruners to cut up to that length. So everything's the same length. You don't have one stem that's hanging out up here, not submerged in water, while the rest of them are submerged, drinking from the bottom of the vase. It's ready to be put in water. Probably somewhere cool in your house. You don't want it next to a sunny window. A lot of times people misunderstand and think that plants need full sun, and that's only when they're out growing in the garden. Once you bring them inside, they want to be somewhere cool. You want to slow down the metabolism so you're getting the most vase life out of your cut flowers. And that is the quintessential southern summertime bouquet.
Evan, thanks so much for having us out on your farm. It's beautiful out here. Learned a lot about flowers. I think everyone else is going to learn a lot. Tell us if we're interested in getting flowers from you, where we could purchase some of these beautiful, beautiful things.
Well, thank you for visiting with me this morning, Corey. It's been a pleasure. I bring my weekly harvest to the Grant Park Farmers Market every Sunday morning from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Awesome. We'll see you there. I love growing flowers in the garden because it allows you to think of the places where you grow in a different perspective. It forces you to think not about what is my yield going to be, but how can I participate in the garden. So you're not going to be able to eat these flowers, obviously, but you are going to use them to give something back to the system that you're engaging in. And being part of a biodiverse farm means that you are part of that ecosystem, and you being involved with it by tending flowers, by growing something that'll bring in insects and that will bring in birds, allows you to garden in a way where you're not just yielding something. Also, flowers are just fun to grow. They're beautiful. Our definition of a farmer has always been, you're a farmer no matter how much or how little you grow, if you grow food for other people. We need a more dynamic view of that for flowers. So we're gonna say if you bring joy to anyone, if you bring joy to people based on what you grow, then you're a farmer. So we hope you plant a seed, maybe some flowers, watch it grow, share the harvest, take care, and eat well.